Oh, hello YouTube. Today on The Naughty Librarian, we are recapping The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming. So we're up to book 10 of the James Bond series. We are getting up there. So here's the thing. The first time I read The Spy Who Loved Me, I hated it. I thought it was really bad. And fun fact, so does Ian Fleming. Like when Ian Fleming sold the rights to the James Bond books, he only sold them the right to the title. He's like, please don't use this story, it's bad. So if you want the superior story feature or what have you, probably the movie's the way to go. But anyway, let's get into our recap here. Of course, we always start off with our yikes factor because these books have a lot of yikes in them. So the main character of this book is a young woman named Viv. I don't really think Ian Fleming is the best author to be writing about a woman's sexual trauma. However, you know, authorial intent is a thing in literature. And it's very clear from Ian Fleming writing this character Viv that he's never judging her for having a sexual past. So she's never like looked down upon as, ew, you've had sex before. Like, no, it's kind of humanizing her. So I take it like with a grain of salt a little bit, because whilst I don't think he understands women as well as he thinks he does, he doesn't necessarily do a bad job telling the story of this character. But again, we're talking about the yikes factor here, and I mean, think about it here. You have Ian Fleming talking about sexual trauma. It's gonna be a big yikes for like consent issues and like a seeming disregard for the traumatic event that sexual assault is. It seems like no biggie in the book, which is like, God damn it, Ian Fleming. Like, perhaps you do not understand. But yeah, outside of, you know, consent issues and all that kind of stuff, I do think he's actually trying to paint a portrait of a character in a non-judgmental way. So there's that. I think it just proves that Ian Fleming is a good writer, but I don't know if it disproves the yikes factor here. James isn't even in the first 2/3 of this book. FYI, everybody. He's barely in this. All right, yikes factor is complete. Let's get into what actually happened in this book. So first things first, we meet our heroine, Viv, and she is a French-Canadian, like, babe. She's a dime. She's a 10. She's great. She's so hot and she's French Canadian. So the story is set at this remote, like, hotel, motel, cabins. Like, it's in the woods, like in the Adirondack Mountains. And instead of like a row of rooms, they're like each individual cabins, but it's all like one motel. I'm setting the scene. Anyway, so Viv is there. She's alone. It's a dark and stormy night. And for the whole first third of this book, like a good chunk of this book, it's not even that long. It's very thin of a book. It's just Viv reminiscing about her former love life and like, you know, all the boys I've loved before. And like, it's important because it's a whole third of the book, but I'm going to kind of TLDR it and get to the present, essentially. Okay, so the simplest way I could like sum it up is just to say Viv gets tricked by fuckboys, like a lot. I'll add some more flavor to that synopsis, but so Viv, she was orphaned young. She got taken in by her aunt. Her aunt's like, you need finishing school, go to England. So she goes to London to start finishing school. Then we get the story of her first love, this boy named Derek, who is like such like the epitome of fuckboy. But I don't think they had that term in the 50s. So I'm not sure what they called fuckboys in the 50s. Let me know in the comments if you do, because like, damn, this is like the blueprint of it. And they have kind of like this whirlwind romance, and Derek is always kind of pressuring Viv, like, let's go all the way, let's go all the way. And she's like, no. And eventually he's pulling that like, we just love each other. Why would you have sex with me if you love me? One of those things. And I'm like, ooh, it made me want to smack a bitch. Like, I was so mad at Derek. But she, you know, she's young and in love and naive, and she's like, okay, fine. And he just misuses her. Like, it's not an assault, but like, she obviously isn't into it. She's literally just like, like just underneath him, like, oh God, okay, hopefully it'll be over soon. Like, it's not a good situation. And of course, as in true fuckboy style, after that they've had sex, he's gotten what he's wanted. She literally gets a letter in the mail from him saying, hey, I'm at university, I'm marrying someone else, I couldn't marry you anyway, my parents didn't want me to because like they're rich, so like bye. And Vivian, devastated. Obviously, we've all been there, had our hearts broken for the first time. I feel for her. But Viv, she takes that broken heart, she focuses it onto her career. She gets a job as like an editorial assistant at a newspaper, and she also like is a writer. She has her own column. Like, she's doing great. And this eventually leads her to her next big love, this guy named Kurt. Now, Kurt is a reporter from West Berlin, and he is like the most uptight German stereotype that's ever existed. Okay, picture that. But Viv and Kurt get along well enough, and she gets hired as a correspondent for his newspaper. And they end up living in the same apartment building with each other, so they just spend a lot of time together. You know, friendship stuff. And mainly this is because Kurt was like engaged. He's engaged to this girl back in West Berlin, so everything's just been very platonic and friendship with these two. That is, until Kurt gets dumped the same way Viv got dumped, in a letter saying, hey, I'm over here and I'm marrying someone else, okay, bye. And of course, Viv feels for the guy. She's like, I've been there, I will console you. And all of that consoling leads them to like a situationship where it's physical and friendship. They're like fuck buddies, essentially. And it's a complete 180 from Derek, because, you know, Kurt is much better at sex than him. Like, he actually, like, listens and, like, does things that she enjoys, because he's like, women should enjoy sex, la la la. You know, basically she's just getting, like, fucked with German efficiency. However, a good thing can't last, apparently, because it turns out Kurt's bit of a fuckboy, too, because, like, they've been in their situationship for a bit, they've been having lots of sex. Uh-oh, Viv is accidentally pregnant. She tells Kurt what's going on, and she's expecting him to at least be like, oh my gosh, like, what should we do next? Like, be in this with her. And his whole response is, ew. And he leaves. And then he proceeds to not only dump her, but also fire her from her job at his newspaper, because, you know, he had no intention of ever marrying Viv. He's like, yeah, we were having fun, you know, I'm German, I have to marry like a nice German woman who's Aryan. And it's like, like, I'm not saying he's a Nazi, but like, anyway, so Kurt, he gives her like a bunch of money. He's like, hey, go to Zurich and you can get an abortion. Like, they do it all the time. So Viv ends up going to Zurich and doing exactly that. And after that experience, you know, she comes back to London and she's like, man, fuck this town. I'm done with London. Nothing good has ever happened to me here. I'm going back to Canada. So she heads back, she buys a Vespa, and she's like, all right, I'm gonna take some me time. I'm gonna go on a solo road trip and like forget the past and like move on with the future. So she's on her road trip and she ends up at this like Dreamy Pines Motor Court, which is where the story takes place. So the owners of the motel are the Fancies, and the husband is you know, the lecherous guy that you could expect he is. And, you know, the wife is just kind of putting up with it, but like, it never really crosses that line. It's just kind of creepy. And Viv is used to it at this point. Men are horrible to her all the time. So the Fancies, they're like, hey, why don't you work here for a couple weeks? You know, we're going to be closing down the motel for the winter, and our receptionist has quit, you know. Why don't you just like work here for a couple weeks? Should be a red flag, okay? Why did your receptionist quit? Why do you only need me to work 2 weeks? Red flag number 1, everybody. Because the whole situation is like sketchy, but you know, Viv is like a young woman. She doesn't know any better. She's young and naive and easy to trick. So she's like, okay. It was the last night before they're closing for the winter. And they're like, hey, Viv, we're heading out early. You need to stay here by yourself all night. Just make sure, you know, things are locked up. It's a really easy job. And then the owner of the motel will come in the morning and like pay you. Mind you, she has not been paid yet. Red flag number 2. Don't let your bosses leave without paying you, okay? And guess what, everybody? There's a red flag number 3 here, because before the Fancies leave, they start like being real big dicks and mean to her, and they literally take everything not nailed down, like the silverware, TVs, everything they can fit in their car, and they peel out. So it's like, oh, red flag number 3. Okay. But Viv, you know, she's kind of just stranded there, and also she doesn't know any better. So she's like, okay, I guess I'm on my own. And just, you know, the icing on the awful cake here is that a massive storm is coming in, and it arrives. It's like lightning and thunder, and lightning's like literally hitting the ground in front of this motel. It's like a bad storm. Viv is there all by herself, and she's just hoping like she doesn't lose power in the motel, because like the phone lines were already turned off before like the fancies left. That's a red flag number 4. They cut off the phone line. Okay, you can't even call for help. So Viv is just kind of sitting there being cozy and waiting out this storm, and that's when she's reminiscing about her past loves. Now we're moving into part 2 of this story. So all of a sudden, bam, 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 there's this really loud pounding on the motel door, and Viv is like, oh, no one's supposed to be here. And she's like, oh shit, I left the vacant sign on. Oh no, they're probably looking for a room. So she opens the door, and it's like these 2 obvious mobsters are standing there. One of them's named Horror, and he's basically like if Lurch had metal teeth. I think he's the closest like character that's supposed to be Jaws in the movie because of the metal teeth, but very different builds. But anyway, you have like Lurch with metal teeth, and then you have his like sidekick Slugsy, who is a guy who's just like disgusting and also has full alopecia. I don't know why this was written into the script that he needed alopecia, but yeah, he'd be gross even if he had hair. So anyway, Viv is like, hey, what you doing here? Sorry, we're actually closed. I can't give you a room. And they're like, no, we work for Sanguinetti. You know, let us in. And she's like, well, I guess, you know, if you work for Mr. Sanguinetti. And she like lets them in. Girl, Vivian, this is why you keep getting killed in the horror movie. Okay, damn it. Because as soon as they're in the lobby of this motel, Viv is like, I have fucked up. She immediately realizes, oh, these guys are bad guys, because Slugsley is just acting like aggressively like sex predator to her all of a sudden, and it is really aggressive, and so she slaps him, and Slugsley responds to being slapped by pulling out his gun and shooting all the coffee cans right near her. But Horror is kind of a no-nonsense hitman, so he's like, Slugsley, get the fuck out of here. Like, walk it off, bro. Go check the other cabins. Let me send Slugsy out. And he sits down. He's not interested in harassing Viv. He's like, hey, will you go make us some food? And like, don't be a bother, and we'll leave you alone. Like, Slugsy, he's a lot, okay? Just, can I have some eggs? I mean, it's the biggest lie in the world, but at least right now he only wants eggs. So take the wins while you can get them. So Viv is like, okay, I guess I'm making eggs. And she's in the kitchen, she's like cooking, and she's like trying to find things she can like use to defend herself, because she's like, oh, there's only one way this night's gonna end for me. I'm gonna get totally murdered. So she's grabbing little things like little knives and stuff and like sticking in her pockets. Slugsley finally comes back, boom, knocks open the door, comes in, sits down, starts talking to Horror, and she realizes Slugsy didn't lock the door and it's ajar. She's like, this is an opportunity. So she immediately bolts. She runs out that door. She's like, no! She's running through the woods. She's trying to hide or something. But mind you, you know, she's a young woman. She doesn't know no better. She doesn't know what to do. She's just hoping for the best. She's running through the woods. And of course, the mobsters find her soon enough, and they literally drag her back to the motel. And Slugsley is really excited by this. He's like, ooh, you did something bad. I'm going to assault you, and this makes me happy, because he's a creep. And he's like, but that's later. Right now, Horror, you know, he's gonna go live up to his name, because like he is an artist with pain. So before Horror can really start in on her, Viv manages to grab an ice pick she hid in her pocket, and splah, she like comes at his face, and she does cut him in the face. But the problem is she doesn't get away, and now they have her, and he is upset that he has a cut face. So he proceeds to just beat the snot out of this woman. Like, it's bad. She's unconscious. So when Viv comes to a little bit later, she realizes 2 things. 1, she is in the shower of her cabin, and 2, she is naked. Oh, and there's a 3rd thing she knows is Slugsy's there. So she's like, oh no, like this is a bad situation. However, Slugsy is just kind of like, hey, get cleaned up and come back and make us food. We're still hungry. So at this point, Viv doesn't really have another option. So she's like, okay. And she like takes a shower and gets all the blood off. Apparently she she just got beat up real bad. And she gets herself cleaned up. Slugsy drags her back to like the lobby where the kitchen is. And she just goes back to work making food for these monsters. And things are calm for like a while. Like she's just making food and cooking it. And she gives them food. She makes them for herself. She's eating it. And then, you know, Slugsy's gotta ruin the peace by being aggressively sex predator again. And Viv's like, ew, no. And Slugsy is not a man who likes hearing no, so he starts getting very aggressive and violent. Luckily, she manages to reach the cutlery drawer, so she like grabs a bunch of stuff and just throws it in Slugsy's face. So just forks and knives just to the face. And you know, Slugsy's going like this, dodging, but Horror comes up behind her and grabs her. So, uh-oh, she's in trouble. Like, they are ripping her clothes off. Like, things are about to take a very drastic turn. But literally saved by a bam, 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 there's another big knock at the door. So now we're starting part 3 of the book, because now there's a new visitor at the motel. Who is it? Would it be a certain British spy? Maybe. So the mobsters like, shit. And then they grab Viv and they kind of just shove her at the door. They're like, tell whoever is out there to go away or we're gonna shoot you. And Viv's, you know, she's like holding her clothes together and she's beat up, going to answer the door. Like, no one thought this would be suspicious. So she gets there, it's pouring rain still, and it's none other than James Bond. Cue the theme song. And like, ooh, it's just such a good shot. What had happened was James is there completely accidentally. He was driving back from another mission. His car got a flat about a mile away from this motel, and he saw the vacant sign on. He's like, oh, I'll go there and like ask to like stay the night because I don't want to be out in the rain. But mind you, Viv has a gun pointed at her, so she's like, no, we're closed. We're definitely super closed. She's like doing this to him, and James is like, that's weird. And then he's like, oh, your clothes are torn and you're beat up. You know what? I think I'm gonna come in. Like James puts one and one together real quick, and so he's like, comes into the room. So now there's a wild card in the picture, and the mobsters are really unhappy about it because they're like, who's this fucking guy? And James is like, listen, you have your vacancy sign on. There's laws about this. Like, do you want to lose your motel license? Because like, I have friends in the government. And the mobsters are like, ugh, okay, fine. Have a cabin or whatever. Oh my God. We're already going to kill people tonight. What's one more at this point? James is like, fabulous. I'm going to go get my bag. And so he walks outside and like Viv like scoots out after him real quick. So I'll help you with your bags. I'm a good hotel worker. They go over to James's car. You know, the mobsters are watching this whole like thing, and James is like, act casual, just pretend you're looking at my car and you think it's a cool car. And so she's just like looking at the car, and like they're talking to each other, but James is like, hey, what's going on? Who are these guys? How many guns do they have? Like, he starts formulating his plan here because he knows something's amiss. And Viv tells him all this she knows. She's like, I don't know how many guns they have, but they're a good shot with what they do have, and like all this stuff. James is like, okay. He pops open his glove box, takes extra ammo because he's like, I'm probably gonna need this. You know, brings weapons. So they go back inside, and Slugsy's like, all right, British guy, here's your fucking cabin. They all just kind of sit back down in the lobby of this hotel, and it's like the most awkward meal like ever had, because James is like, hey, can I have some eggs as well? Everyone wants eggs in this book. So she's like, oh, okay. She's back in the kitchen making eggs. So Viv, she finishes cooking, she gives James the food, and she's just kind of like standing near him, and they get to talking, and James, you know, tells her like, oh, how did I end up here of all places? Well, what happened was there was this Russian defector named Boris, right? And he was out in Canada. That's where like the British government hides defectors, apparently, is Canada. But the problem is the Russians figured out where Boris was, and they want him dead. And it just kind of so happens that Boris somewhat resembles James. Not like closely, but they're about the same height and build with brown hair. So from a distance, like he could pass for Boris. So his whole plan here is to extract Boris early and then just go about his day as if he is Boris and wait for the assassins to come to him. This whole ambush that they set up for the hitmen doesn't go well, Like, I mean, ultimately it's successful. They did kill all the hitmen, but like the problem is a lot of James's like friends who were like Mounties and stuff, like people on his side, ended up getting killed in the crossfire as well. So James, he's really upset about it, but he doesn't have words to talk about his feelings. So he's like, you know what? I gotta walk this one off. Okay, I'm gonna drive back to the States and I'm gonna make my report, but I need to drive for a while because I am sad and I don't know how to express this. So takes us to now. And it's right around now that the mobsters decide, you know what? Y'all have talked to each other enough. It's time for bed. So the mobsters cut the power through the whole motel and they give James and Viv like these little oil lamps and send them on their way. Hey, go to bed, go to your cabins. And it's at this point where the book doesn't make sense. It's a huge plot hole because why on earth would Slugsy and Horror not follow them back to the hotel rooms? Like, it makes no sense because they're doing a whole lot to like get these two separated and they just send them off on their own. Like, guys, come on. But anyway, that's what happens. So James, he goes back with Viv to her little cabin and he's like, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to move furniture around. You're going to block entrances and windows and stuff to try to keep the mobsters from breaking into your cabin. And he's like, hey, have you ever fired a gun before? And she's like, I've fired a BB gun. He's like, cool. You're going to take my gun. You're going to shoot people with it, I guess. So James, he leaves. He has to go back to his cabin. He can't be there when the mobsters show up. And so Viv is like, what the fuck? So she's hiding. She's like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna get in bed now with a gun. And here's plot hole number 2. She manages to fall asleep in this room. And it's like, it felt very Shakespearean because every time they needed time to pass and characters not to know information, they had them just fall asleep. It feels like that. But after a few hours, you know, Viv gets woken up and it's from like this really dim light. She sees like inside of her closet. And she's like, huh, that's weird. Oh, the like little light in the closet must still be on. I didn't close the door all the way. And then she's like, wait a minute. There's no power on in the motel. And as she's coming to this realization, Slugsy jumps out of the closet, knocks her out before she can even try to reach for her gun. So Viv, when she awakens again, this poor girl has such a concussion. She's been knocked out twice tonight. But anyway, she comes to, she's being dragged away from her cabin and like a bunch of the motel is on fire. And she starts freaking out because someone is dragging her. And he's like, it's James, calm down. You want me to leave you in the burning room? So she's like, okay. She calms down. And she's like, why is everything on fire? And James is like, girl, like the mobsters were setting shit on fire, like a lot. And like, they're probably going to burn down the motel for like, you know, insurance money, insurance fraud kind of a deal. And they wanted you so you could be the patsy and you'd burn in the building and they just blame the whole fire on you. Like you were an idiot and you left something burning at night. And Viv is like, well, then how are you alive? Didn't the mobsters come after you and try to kill you too? And James is like, yeah, but like, I know how to expect mobsters. Okay. He like set up his cabin to look like he was just in bed, sleeping away. And then he just grabbed like his weapons and stuff and hid in the woods behind the motel until like, you know, maybe about an hour after he'd parted from Viv, he heard a door open and then a bunch of like silencers like shooting the bed. So they thought James was dead. They thought they killed this guy already. Comes back, you know, for Viv, he doesn't want her to get killed. So he drags her out, grabs some of whatever of her stuff he can. He even manages to save her Vespa. Like this is solid moves from this guy. Like, oh my gosh, like I could understand why he would be the spy who loved me. Like he saved my Vespa. What? I mean, mainly he saved it as a getaway vehicle, but still, he saved her Vespa. Like, he didn't have to do that. So Vivian is very relieved that, like, okay, we have a getaway car, and you're okay, and I'm okay. Why don't we just run away right now? Like, we could just leave. James is just like, absolutely effing not. Those motherfuckers over there, you know what they did? They ruined my favorite shirt, okay? I am upset. I am going to go kill them both and it's going to get real violent. I have some feelings I need to work out right now. But James is like, on that note, Viv, it's a good idea for you to go hide. You should go in the woods and hide so I don't have to worry about like saving you. I can just worry about what they're doing. So he's like, you got it? Cool, bye. And he literally just runs back to the burning motel. And she's like, what the fuck? She just like left in the streets. So she's like, oh God. She's also just doesn't understand like the change in his personality because, you know, she hasn't met him for a long time, but all the time she's spent with him so far, he's been the hero character. He's been truthful and like heroic and protective and like charming and like telling her little stories and making her feel calm. He was like, you know, the human side of James, but this interaction with James was completely different because he was not charming James. He was murder mode James when he was talking to her. And he was just like, go in the woods and hide. I don't want to protect you right now. I'm going to go murder people. So it's like seeing the unhuman side of James from an outside perspective, which I thought was really interesting because we've had this situation in books prior when James goes into murder mode and it is deeply unsettling for people around him. However, we've only ever seen James in murder mode from James's perspective. So it's kind of the first time we're seeing murder mode James from an outside perspective. Frankly, I haven't talked about this theme enough lately, but James's whole story arc in his series is his like searching for meaning and humanity while still doing what he does. Because he puts on these human airs because he feels like there's something wrong with him and something missing, that he can't like interact with normal people. He feels like he needs this humanity to find purpose. And he doesn't usually show murder mode to people he's not planning to kill. So it, you know, it's interesting like exchange. It's only over like a few sentences. Anyways, I'm getting too deep in the weeds right now, okay? Literary analysis over. Let's get back to what's happening. So Viv, she's just in the woods, super worried about James. She's like, oh my God, he's gonna get himself killed. All I can see is motel burning down. What am I gonna do? She eventually sees Slugsy and Horror and she's like, oh, there they are. They're trying to carry a TV out to their car. They're stealing shit too. Finally, she sees James sneaking up on them. And James gets a drop on the mobsters. He's like, freeze, you know, one of those situations. He's like, Viv, get back over here. I need an extra set of hands. She's like, oh God. So she's like running back out of the woods over to James. James tells her, go search these guys for weapons. I can't take my gun off them. So she's over there trying to search for weapons. Mind you, she doesn't know what she's doing. So Horror immediately like, boom, hits her. The gun goes flying. He grabs her. Now they're in a pickle of a situation. But, you know, James is still in murder mode, so he's not really making quips right now. He's like, Viv, spread your legs. And she does automatically. She's like, okay. She spreads her legs and James shoots Horror in the foot. And I mean, that's one way of getting a bad guy off of a girl. Shoot him in the foot. However, the bad side of this situation is Slugsy's holding a TV. So he just throws the TV at James's face. So now James is like, has been hit by a TV. The mobsters have some time to scamper off into one of the other cabins. So Viv is like, oh, fuck. So she reaches in one of the other cabins. She grabs like a little like a first aid kit. She comes out. James is like, you know, he got hit in the face with a TV. He needs some bandages and stuff. So she's like cleaning him up. And James proceeds to say the most polite British thing, which was, sorry, Viv. I rather made a hash of that round, which is the most polite way of saying, well, I fucked that one up. But James is like, all right, I gotta go deal with these mobsters. Viv, you know the routine. Go hide in the woods again. I can't protect you right now. Go in the woods. But before Viv can like go back to the woods, Slugsy's out there. He grabbed his machine gun. He's firing out the window of one of the cabins. And honestly, like all hell breaks loose right now. Okay, so like they're in a gunfight. Viv is like hiding. She sees Horror like crawling on the ground towards the mobster's car. And then like, you know, James is still in a gunfight with Slugsy. He does manage to shoot Slugsy a couple times. So like he can't hold the machine gun anymore. And Horror is in there. He got to the car. He starts it up. And like Slugsy like waddles out of the hotel room, jumps in the car. They start speeding away. Viv is like, they're getting away. So she like runs after them and she's just shooting wildly at this car, you know, not hitting anything because she doesn't know what she's doing. And then James, in murder mode still, again, reminiscent of Diamonds Are Forever, he just stands there very calmly and points and shoots at the car. And then, of course, you know, one bullet, one hit. And he manages to shoot Horror in the car, and the car like swerves and it hits like this little low cliff that leads it into a lake. So the car is now in the lake and Horror's dead. Slugsy's in there and he's been shot. They're sinking into the lake quickly. So James is like, all right, Job well done. So James and Viv, they go back to one of the cabins, and then like one thing leads to another. They end up having like the best sex that anyone's ever had, apparently. You know, it's at this point that you're really realizing that Ian Fleming doesn't understand sexual trauma. Like, she's been through a lot tonight. The last thing she wants to do is fuck this guy. But here we are anyway. So like they have like the best sex, and they're going to bed afterward. And a little bit later, what do you know? Viv gets woken up again. She has been woken up or came to so many times in the course of a few hours. It's a lot for the night. So she wakes up because she sees like the curtain moving, and she's like, what's that? And then she realizes that's a face in the window. It's fucking Slugsy. He's not dead. He survived the crash. He managed to drag his alopecia butt over here. And she's like so frozen in fear because it's all of a sudden this monster's at the window. And he pulls out a gun, but you know, he's been shot, so he's kind of clumsy, and he hits the window with it and it shatters before he can like get off a shot. And luckily, the shot he gets off misses because, you know, he has bad guy aim. They don't hit the targets, they're bad guys. But James is the good guy in this situation, and he has good guy aim. So, you know, he pulls the gun out from under his pillow, shoots Slugsy. And Slugsy, he runs off. He's been shot yet again and still not dead. He runs off. And James is like, Viv, are you okay? Are you hurt? And she's like, no. He's like, all right, stay here. He runs off after Slugsy, mind you, butt naked. And Viv is just going, what the fuck, again? So James comes back a little bit later, and, you know, he's like, just like panting. And he's just like really turned off emotionally, like murder mode doubled down. And he's just very calmly like, Viv, when you wake up in the morning, don't go behind the building. It's rather messy and you're not going to enjoy that. So he's like, okay. And he just starts like hanging like some towels over the window to cover it because, you know, it's broken. And he's still in murder mode. Like, he has no emotions at this moment. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition because he's also butt naked. However, like, Viv can kind of understand him in a way. Like, that's instinctual because she understands, like, he's in assassin mode right now. He's actually really emotionally fragile. I don't think most people realize that. So she's just very calm with him. She's like, James, you saved my life. You're a hero. Like, you're the best. Here, you're cold. Why don't you come back to bed with me? You know, let me warm you up. So she's just being very gentle with him. And like, I think it's exactly what he needed because all he can do is just hold her for a while. He's just hugging her and like just cold. And like, I think he's just coming back to humanity because someone was just kind to him in this instance. She brings him back to bed and to like warm him up. And of course, you know, that leads to the greatest sex ever had, round 2 electric boogaloo. And after the sex, they're gonna go back to bed. Might as well get some sleep while you can. And they kind of fall asleep. But I'm just gonna say it was kind of cute because Viv's the big spoon. Because I feel like James needed to be the little spoon in the situation. In the morning, she wakes up. Again, she wakes up yet again in this story. And James, gone. Empty bed next to her. She's like, where did he go? And Viv realizes right away that like, he's not just like out getting a bagel, like he's gone, for real gone. And she sees that he left a note behind. So, you know, she takes the note, she reads it, and like TLDR on the note here, but basically he's like, Viv, I'm gonna go over to like the police and the highway patrol. I'm gonna tell them what happened, and I'm gonna send like some people to help you. And you know what else? I'm gonna send them with breakfast because you probably don't have any food to eat there. They're gonna come help you. And also, like, you know, you did stop insurance fraud, and also you were an integral part of like bringing 2 criminals to justice who had like bounties on their head. So like, you know, there's definitely rewards for all of these things. And like, I want you to keep the money. I'm gonna make sure you get every penny of this money because you're a wonderful girl and you deserve nothing but happiness in your life. Try not to have nightmares about what happened here because it doesn't usually happen to people. You just need to take it that this was a scary thing that happened to you and you need to move on. And if you ever really need me again, you can contact me through the Ministry of Defense. and this is my code number. And it's actually kind of a really sweet letter. He could have just left and said like, hey, you want some money? Cool. And like not said anything about her being a wonderful girl and that she deserves to be happy. I mean, you know, she did comfort him when he was at his most monstrous, and she didn't like turn away disgusted from like the parts of himself that he thinks are just unnatural. So like, I think he has a little bit of a soft spot for her. I think he does fall in love with like a lot of women. He just falls in love all the time. So Viv, she gets cleaned up and dressed, and she keeps the little note. And then right around now, she starts hearing the sirens coming. So the police show up, and these are the cops that James said he was sending to her. So he already took care of everything. They show up, they give her donuts, and like they're really nice to her. And like she's just like sitting there answering some questions, but like really they don't have a lot of questions. They know what happened. Like they talk to a secret agent. Like they're gonna take his word for it. And then we get kind of one more sentimental scene for the road. Viv is talking to the police captain, and he reads James' letter that he left for her. He starts talking to her like rather fatherly. He's like, listen, you know, I've read the letter. One can assume y'all had relations with each other, but he's like, you know, he did give you some good advice in this letter. You know, you should try to forget what happened here. Like, forget the nightmares. And, you know, you really need to forget this guy too. I don't want you getting your heart broken over this guy because, like, he's a professional. I have seen professionals in my line of work and in the war and stuff. And I know him when I see one, and he is a different species than you and me. Like, don't get hung up on this guy. Just kind of give her some fatherly advice. So it was actually really sweet, and he's not a judgmental conversation. He's just like, listen, I know you guys had sex, but like, don't go fall in love with this guy, please. Like, I feel like I need to tell you this as a father. So Viv is also kind of like touched by it. She's like, that was really nice that you cared about what was going to happen to me and stuff. So she's like, you know what, I'll do that. Thanks for telling me that. I needed to hear it. And she, you know, she grabs her helmet, she gets back on her Vespa, and the police captain is saying goodbye. He's like, hey, I want you to live a safe, happy life, you know, one of those goodbyes. And she's like, yeah, you too. And she's like driving off on her little Vespa. And she knows she does take his words to heart. She already knew the first time they had sex that she's not going to keep this guy. This guy ain't never going to stay. And it's okay because she didn't expect him to. And he never lied to her about it. So she's kind of like learned about adult relationships in this. However, you know, she is still like a young ingenue, and she's like, a part of my heart is always going to be like in love with James, but I don't really need him to stay either because like I'm enough on my own. So really it's like a story of coming of age and like finding yourself through sex with a spy and being almost killed. The end, everybody. That's the end of the book. So yeah, it's a really short book that James is only barely in. Like again, the first third is just reminiscing about her, you know, her past loves. The second one, bad guys show up. And then part 3, James shows up, and it's just nonstop action fest. So overall, I really disliked this book when I first read it. I thought it was terrible. It was just, oh God, Ian Fleming should not be writing this character. But on the second read that I'm doing for this video, I actually found a lot more things to like about it. I found more like moments of humor in it. I found more moments of like genuine heartfelt moments. And I do like Viv as a character. She, you know, everyone's been 23 and stupid and easy to trick. So like, I get it. I've been there, girl. So I do like it. Do I think it's a good James Bond book? No. It's not really the best work he's ever done, but like I do feel like it has some merit. The yikes factor though is a lot. You're just gonna have to go in here knowing that like Ian Fleming does not understand sexual trauma, and he's gonna say things in this book that are just like, oh my God, why would a human say that? That's gonna be the reading experience, but if you look past it, I do think it has some stuff to offer. So like, I did like it better the second time. All right, so that's it. That was A Spy Who Loved Me. There's 4 more books of this series I'm going to be covering, but yeah, let me know in the comments down below. What's a book you liked better the second time you read it? For me, like surprisingly, The Spy Who Loved Me, I liked it better the second time. What's that book for you? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. Links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.